If you look at what just unfolded in Washington over the past 6 hours, this no longer resembles a trade dispute. It's not a mere escalation. It doesn't even feel like something that normally occurs between neighboring nations. What we're seeing looks more like a financial assault the United States has historically reserved for its most hostile adversaries, regimes it sought to overthrow, dictatorships it aimed to economically crush. And as of 3:17 this morning, that weapon has been aimed squarely at Canada. The US Treasury Department sent a directive to every major American bank: JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, Bank of America, Citigroup, Wells Fargo, every one of them. The order commands these institutions to sever correspondent banking ties with Canadian banks within 72 hours. For those outside finance, here's what that really means. Nearly every international transaction conducted in US dollars passes through this system, which is essentially the backbone of global finance. When a Canadian company pays a European supplier, the money routes through a US bank. When a Canadian pension fund invests in Asia, the dollars settle in New York. When a Canadian tourist uses their card in Mexico, the transaction touches the US financial network. Cut off correspondent banking, and you don't just restrict trade data, disconnect a country from the modern economy. You render its currency almost worthless. You make international business operations nearly impossible. This is the financial equivalent of a nuclear strike. And the United States just pointed it at the nation with the longest peaceful border in human history. Historically, this extreme measure has only been used 3 times: Iran in 2012, North Korea in 2017, and Russia in 2022. 3 isolated states, widely regarded as international pariahs, deemed worthy of punishment by the Western world. And now, Canada, the country that stormed Juno Beach alongside American troops. The country that opened its airports to stranded Americans on September 11th. The country that has been the US's largest trading partner for decades. The nation is now being treated like North Korea by the sitting president. The administration is in chaos. The financial system is rattled. And most Americans have no idea what just happened. In the next few minutes, I'll walk you through how we arrived here. What Carney did that pushed Washington to unleash a weapon that's supposed to be untouchable. And why the next 72 hours could determine whether the global economy survives or unravels entirely. Let's rewind to yesterday afternoon, because the events behind closed doors explain everything. After the Sovereignty Coalition announcements, after the Bank of England opened its vaults to Canada, after the defense procurement pivot, the White House went into private crisis mode. Not a public spectacle, but a full-scale internal meltdown. Chiefs of staff canceling meetings, phones dead. Sources say the president spent most of the afternoon in the residence, not the Oval Office, glued to 3 screens: Fox News, Newsmax, and live currency feeds. He watched the dollar tank in real time, and those present report that he went quiet and calm, but a silence that staff have learned to fear. Around 2 p.m. Eastern, the National Security Advisor tried a back-channel approach to Ottawa through the ambassador of the State Department, but via a former Canadian businessman connected to both governments. The message was straightforward. The president was willing to discuss de-escalation if Canada publicly admitted that the tariff dispute had been a misunderstanding. Read that carefully. This wasn't an offer to remove tariffs. It wasn't a proposal to unfreeze assets. It was a demand for public humiliation. Carney needed to stand at a podium and declare that freezing sovereign assets, invoking emergency war powers against an ally, and strangling a G7 partner was just a minor mix-up, a misunderstanding among friends. Carney's response arrived 11 minutes later. In diplomacy, 11 minutes is essentially instantaneous and blunt. One sentence: Canada does not negotiate under coercion. We will engage the president in the appropriate international forum. That single sentence ended diplomacy and triggered the Treasury directive 12 hours later. Reports indicate that upon reading it, the president uttered 5 words that changed everything, cut them off from everything. No policy review, no economic council, no consultation with Treasury lawyers, just 5 words at 2:30 p.m. and 12 hours later. The full machinery of American financial enforcement was unleashed against a democracy of 40 million because women can tolerate a brief rebuff. The directive was drafted between 6 p.m. and midnight, according to leaked sources. And that leak itself is historic. Around 1 p.m. Eastern, a senior Treasury official, not a junior staffer, not an intern, but a high-ranking officer, contacted Reuters directly, providing the full directive text alongside a personal statement. I have served in the Treasury Department under 4 presidents. I have never witnessed a directive this reckless. It threatens irreparable damage to the credibility of the US financial system. I am releasing this because the American people deserve to know what is being done in their name. This was a senior official risking their career to alert the public, a signal of the gravity and danger of the situation. When insiders are sounding alarms, the threat is real. Markets reacted before sunrise. Asian markets opened first. The Nikkei in Tokyo fell 3% in the first hour. The Hang Seng at Hong Kong dropped 4%. European exchanges followed, with the FTSE, DAX, and CAC opening deep in the red. Bonds moved too. US Treasury yields surged as foreign holders accelerated sell-offs. Central banks in Asia, which had quietly diversified away from dollars for months, suddenly had a loud reason to speed up. The real devastation, however, hit US banks. JP Morgan dropped 7%, Goldman Sachs 8%, Citigroup 9%, Bank of America 11% in a single pre-market session. Why? Because the correspondent banking system is not just a Canadian lifeline. It's how US banks earn billions in fees. Cutting Canada harms revenue directly. Analysts at Morgan Stanley estimate this directive could cost US banks roughly $14 billion annually. Gone. All because 5 words were uttered at 2:30 p.m. And here's what should alarm every American. The correspondent banking system relies on trust. International banks rely on US banks for neutrality and professionalism. Once that system becomes a political weapon, banks worldwide scramble for alternatives, not choice, but obligation. That search has already begun. Multiple sources report that the European Central Bank held an emergency meeting to discuss creating a fully independent euro-based clearing system outside US control. This has long been theoretical. After this morning, it's an active project with funding and timelines. The administration has just targeted Canada, given the world reason to bypass the dollar entirely. Now, what did Carney do? Well, the financial world was collapsing. He was acting decisively. The last 6 hours may represent the most consequential moves by any Canadian leader. At 4 p.m. Eastern, Carney convened an emergency parliamentary session. Not a cabinet meeting, a full session. MPs were pulled from their homes, some arriving in casual clothes. The speaker noted it was only the 4th emergency session in Canadian history, the last one being post-September 11th. Carney addressed Parliament for 12 minutes, no notes, no teleprompter, just delivering the gravity of the situation under fluorescent lights. He announced 3 measures. First, the Canadian Financial Sovereignty Act, granting the Bank of Canada authority to establish direct currency settlement agreements with any willing central bank, bypassing this dollar entirely. This allows trade with Europe in euros, Japan in yen, the UK in pounds without dollars ever touching the transaction. It's infrastructure that, once in place, permanently reduces dollar dependency. Second, the Strategic Asset Repatriation Directive. All Canadian government assets held in US institutions, bonds, deposits, reserves would return to Canada. Around $380 billion is being pulled home over days, not months. The logistical coordination is immense, but the machinery is already moving. Third, and most alarming to Washington, Carney revealed he had phoned the governor of the People's Bank of China. No details were given. The point was clear. Canada is signaling that continued hostility could push it closer to US rivals. To be clear, Canada is becoming a Chinese ally. Carney is pivoting to Beijing. Is using potential Chinese engagement as leverage. He knows Washington fears losing allies to Chinese influence. Every hawk in the Pentagon, every strategist in state, every sea analyst has spent years preventing this exact scenario. And by simply picking up the phone, Carney sent a message. Do you really want to push us toward your enemies? He doesn't need a deal. Knowledge of contact alone is leverage. In geopolitics, perception is reality. And right now, the perception is that America is losing Canada strategically, economically, and militarily. The White House response was immediate. Sources report the National Security Advisor stormed the Oval Office at 5 a.m. with a 1-page briefing. Canada has initiated contact with the PBOC. Recommend immediate de-escalation. The president reportedly tossed the briefing aside, calling it a bluff. Perhaps it is, perhaps it isn't, but markets aren't convinced. Gold hit an all-time high this morning. The Swiss franc surged. Bitcoin jumped 11% into Or's classic moves when the global financial system is seen as fragile. And right now, many highly informed actors with substantial assets think it's fragile indeed. What happens next is critical. The 72-hour deadline in the Treasury directive expires in roughly 66 hours. If it passes without rescindment, US banks will start terminating ties with Canadian banks. Rebuilding those relationships will take months, possibly years. Legal frameworks, compliance structures, and trust can't be restored with a phone call. Decades of US-Canada financial integration could unravel in 3 days. Congress knows this. Movement on Capitol Hill has been unprecedented since early Watergate. I have family on both sides of that border, friends whose livelihoods depend on it. I grew up trusting this alliance above politics, above ego, above the whims of any leader. That world is fading, maybe already gone, and the tragedy is an enemy is doing jits, a friend who forgot what friendship means. Can this be reversed in 66 hours? Or is it too late? Is there anyone left in Washington with the courage to stop it? And when history records these events, will it declare, "This was the week America lost the world"? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. If you aren't subscribed, do it now, because in 66 hours, this story hits its climax. It'll be here with every detail. The clock is ticking, the world is watching, and nobody in Washington is picking up the phone.